We ask that if you're not actively presenting to turn off your video. You can turn it on if you want to verbally ask a question. It just helps with the bandwidth for our low bandwidth users. We do have live captions available today, and those can be turned on using the captioning menu bar. And now I'd like to turn it over for accessible social media.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alexa Heinrich. I am the social media manager for St. Petersburg College in Florida, and I am going to be talking to you about accessibility and how it impacts your social media today. So I'm very excited to talk about this subject. I present on it a lot, and I think it's very vital that as people working in higher education, we know about it. So I'm going to go ahead and get set up here. I am going to turn off my camera since it gives my Wi-Fi one less thing to do, and then we'll get rolling. I hope everyone has been enjoying the conference today. Let's see. Okay, there we go. Okay, so again, this is Accessible Social. Just hold all questions that you have until the end, and we'll go over them once I'm done speaking. So when it comes to accessibility, many digital marketers want to know what makes it important for social media and what it means to be inclusive online. Not everyone experiences or navigates digital spaces the same way. There are millions of people with disabilities who rely on assistive technology and practices to access digital content. There are 4 distinct reasons why accessibility matters. Inclusive best practices can have a direct impact on your marketing efforts and affect how many people you reach with your digital content. Like with a brick and mortar location or your website, you also want to make sure that your social media is meeting current accessibility guidelines. Everyone at some point or another will be affected by disability, either through age, illness, or injury. Many brands and organizations are trying to focus more on diversity, equity, and inclusion work, and disability is something that impacts every demographic and every area of DEI. And most importantly, you should just care about the experience that your followers have when they engage with your brand or organization on social media. According to a November 2021 report from the World Health Organization, an estimated 15% of the global population has some sort of disability. This number could also be much larger because not everyone is comfortable disclosing that they are disabled. A wide range of disabilities exist in the world, including physical, cognitive, learning, spinal, psychological, and sensory. For the purposes of this presentation, I will mostly be focusing on sensory disabilities that affect a person's hearing and vision. Disability is diverse and it comes in different forms. Most people think of permanent states when disability is mentioned, such as vision or hearing loss that cannot be medically treated or reversed, but disability is the only diverse community that you can join and leave. Some individuals are born with their disability, others become disabled later in life. It's a full spectrum of possibilities and scenarios. A person could have a temporary impairment due to an injury like a bruised eye or an illness such as losing your hearing from an ear infection. Someone could also have a situational impairment, which means they're affected by their environment or circumstances, like having trouble seeing a screen in different levels of lighting or hearing audio in a crowded room. There are also episodic disabilities, which are disabilities that have no discernible pattern. They can affect you at any given time and change how you interact with the world. Examples would be migraines, vertigo, chronic pain, asthma, and some forms of mental illness like PTSD and bipolar disorder. When you don't create or publish accessible social media content, that means you're potentially excluding a huge part of your audience from your messaging and missing out on important conversions, conversations, and connections. If your social media content isn't accessible, you could also leave yourself open to legal trouble. While most digital accessibility lawsuits focus on the websites of brands and companies, it's not unrealistic to think that social media platforms and apps will soon face legal scrutiny as well. In 2021 alone, there were more than 4,000 ADA-based cases filed, a 15% increase from 2020. Currently, at least 23 countries have governmental policies related to web accessibility, including the United States, Canada, Germany, the United Kingdom, China, and New Zealand. It's best to be proactive when it comes to digital compliance, and marketers should reference the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG, from the World Wide Web Consortium, W3C, to make sure they're meeting current standards for digital accessibility. These are the most universal set of standards we currently have for digital accessibility around the globe. And if you're a federal agency or a vendor for a federal agency within the United States, you also want to make sure that your website and social media is following the requirements of Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. Above all, you should be implementing accessibility best practices because you care about your audience and removing barriers on social media. Now that you know why you should be creating accessible social media content, it's time to learn how. I'm going to take us through accessible practices for copy and formatting, images and visuals, and audio and video. Our first section will cover accessible best practices for copy and formatting. I'll talk about hashtags, post formatting, emoji, alternative characters, and ASCII art. So this section is quite packed. When it comes to social media's favorite conversation device, make sure to capitalize the first letter in each word of your compound hashtags. This method is sometimes referred to as title case, Pascal case, and my favorite name for it, camel case. The capital letters help assistive devices denote the separate words, allowing them to pronounce compound hashtags correctly and not as one long mishmashed word. Camel case is also easier for literally everyone to read, no matter the status of their vision. This formatting can also be applied to your Twitter handle to make that accessible, and it could save your brand from embarrassing PR moments as well. Just look up Susan Boyle hashtag fail if you want an excellent example of why camel case is a good idea. That failure happened many, many years ago, but it's still the gold standard for why camel case is important when you use hashtags. An often overlooked aspect of accessibility in relation to social media is formatting. For social media, this means how you lay out your posts and tweets using spaces, tabs, and hard returns. Because most social media platforms don't offer formatting options unless you're writing an article on LinkedIn, some users will find ways to manipulate their content to achieve the formatted look they want. This kind of forced formatting is commonly seen in tweets where the author has used multiple spaces, tabs, and hard returns to make their content appear in two columns like in this example. It looks like it's in two columns. However, the blue arrows I've placed in between the columns show that tabs were used to create the forced formatting. A screen reader would follow the path of the blue arrows because there's no true gutter in the tweet that tells it to do otherwise. Therefore, the content gets read out of order and sounds like this. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes here and just listen to the content. I'll do this several times throughout the presentation to give you a better idea of what the screen reader experience is like.
This is the path. Please stop formatting your screen reader follows tweets to look like this just when you force your for the sake of viral memes tweets into two columns. It's not accessible. Thanks.
Not exactly easy to follow what was being said there. It was very jumbled and confusing. So until platforms add formatting options, you should compose your social media content knowing it will be read left to right or right to left in a single column by assisted devices and programs. You should also be aware of how you use upper and lowercase letters. Some internet users will type in studly case to indicate mocking sarcasm in their content. Studly case is when you alternate every letter between uppercase and lowercase. It's also known as varied case or SpongeBob case due to a popular meme featuring the Nickelodeon character of the same name. The varied letter case makes it exceptionally hard for a screen reader to properly read the words and can create a confusing experience for users as demonstrated here.
Instagram. Today we're introducing face filters. Snapchat. T0 day we're in TR0 do CNG face VLTER5.
Yeah, that made total sense. I knew exactly what it said. So you should avoid doing formatting like this. I'm going to move on to my favorite section, emoji. Now, everyone loves those colorful icons. Did you know that each individual emoji has its own unique description assigned to it? When an assistive device or program comes across an emoji in written content, it will use the icon's assigned description to accurately describe it to the user. Many emoji also have descriptions and appearances that differ across platforms, devices, and browsers. This particular emoji is known as abandoned house, old house, haunted house, and derelict house. Even emoji with skin tones get additional information added to their base description to keep them unique. If a screen reader were to read this line of emoji, it would say raised hand light skin tone, raised hand medium light skin tone, raised hand medium skin tone, raised hand medium dark skin tone, and raised hand dark skin tone. Keep in mind that because a screen reader picks up on the descriptions of emoji, the excessive use of them is not advised. It's also worth noting that some assistive devices will shorten a line of emoji if only one specific icon is used uninterrupted by other icons, characters, or spaces. For instance, this group of emoji would probably be read as 24 rockets instead of a screen reader saying the word rocket 24 times. It's best to put emoji at the end of your content, otherwise you could make your message confusing, like with this example tweet that has a few emojis sprinkled throughout the content. Once the text-to-speech program translated the emoji, the content ran into several clarity issues, as demonstrated in this short screen recording.
Accessible social. At Carl Camel Case. Having a great time on vacation in Colorado's snow-capped mountain. Gonna get some prime skiing in tomorrow, skier going downhill. Before ending the day with hot cocoa hot beverage. By the fire with my BFF, women with multiple skin tones. Holding hands.
As you heard, the emoji descriptions kind of interrupt the written part of the tweet and make it a little hard to understand. It's also very amusing to me that my phone's text-to-speech program says skier instead of skier. Using emoji as bullet points is quite popular on social media as well, but unfortunately using emoji that way could make your points confusing if the icon descriptions are competing with the content as shown in this second example tweet.
Accessible social. At Carl Camel Case. Keys to a great keynote speech. Face with tears of joy. Don't be afraid to crack jokes. World map. Going off script is okay. Mouth. Have confident body language.
As demonstrated, the three emoji descriptions interrupted the flow of the copy and made it a little difficult to understand. An excellent resource for digital content creators who want to use emoji in smart and strategic ways is emojipedia.org. This website lists every known emoji along with their different appearances and descriptions across platforms, devices, and browsers. So when it comes to emoji on social media, you should use them in moderation, double check their description before using them, place them at the end of posts and tweets to avoid clarity issues, and try to resist changing the color on customizable emoji unless a specific skin tone is necessary for context. Now, that last tip is for people who manage social media professionally, like yourselves. I would never presume to tell someone what emoji skin tones they should use to represent their race or ethnicity on their personal social media. Another best practice for copywriting is one that focuses on a trend that has become quite popular on social media in recent years. Content creators have started using external websites to generate alternative characters for their posts to make the copy appear in different weights, styles, and fonts. You'll notice that the yellow has highlighted text that's in a different font from Twitter's default font. Unfortunately, some assistive devices cannot decipher these characters and will typically skip over them, as shown in this first example tweet. You'll notice that I used alternative characters for the first 3 lines of text, and then Twitter's default font for the latter half of the tweet. This is how my phone's text-to-speech program handled it.
Accessible social. At Carl Camel Case. Unfortunately, not all assistive devices can read these alternative characters, making them inaccessible.
My text-to-speech program completely skipped the first 3 lines, and that's because they could not identify them as readable characters. Even worse are the alternative characters that assistive devices translate into indistinguishable noises or totally different languages, like in this second example tweet.
Accessible social. At Carl Camel Case. Circled Latin capital letter S.
서클드 레틴 24, 우 서클드 레틴 24, M 서클드 레틴 24, 이 서클.
While I only showcased a few seconds of that tweet, it actually took almost 2.5 minutes for my phone's text-to-speech program to read the entire post aloud, when logically it should only take a few seconds. Using alternative characters can also negatively impact the engagement and searchability of your content if a platform doesn't recognize them as readable characters. In my test tweet to the left, I've used 5 different alternative character sets to write the word lackadaisical 5 times. When I did an advanced search on Twitter a few minutes later that specifically combed my account for the word lackadaisical, which I most certainly don't use in my everyday tweeting, Twitter was unable to locate my test tweet, even though it was at the very top of my profile's feed. Content creators should only use the default fonts and formatting options readily available on the platforms. Another popular trend on social media that involves the use of characters is called ASCII art. It uses letters, numbers, punctuation, and other characters to create illustrative memes. ASCII art is used more and more by major brands and organizations as they try to appear relatable and hip with their followers. However, ASCII art is not accessible for screen reader users. Assistive devices are programmed to read characters and punctuation marks as they were originally intended. They cannot properly discern when characters are used to create illustrations, and when read aloud, ASCII art normally sounds something like this.
Bullet_bullet, X. Bullet_bullet, greater than reversed not sign black square, reversed not sign black square _black square, Y.
So the art is clever, but it doesn't make much sense once a screen reader gets a hold of it. ASCII art formatting can also shift between different devices and browsers, meaning you could create an ASCII illustration on the desktop version of Twitter, and it may look a little different on the mobile version of Twitter or TweetDeck because the icons and symbols will have moved. This next section is typically the one that I get the most questions about: how to be accessible with images and visuals. Now, images play a key part on social media, but how does someone with a serious vision disability experience a picture? Assistive devices and programs need alt text, a descriptive physical summary of the image, in order to accurately describe it to a user. Take these two tweets, for example. They are seemingly identical, except that one had alt text applied to it and the other did not. Here's what the first tweet sounds like through my phone's text-to-speech program.
Accessible social. At Carl Camel Case. Alt text is incredibly important to making images accessible. Image. Cluster of peachy pink flowers covered in droplets of water after a thunderstorm. 46 seconds ago.
Versus what the second tweet sounds like.
Accessible social. At Carl Camel Case. Alt text is incredibly important to making images accessible. Image. 20 seconds ago.
The first tweet obviously had alt text applied to it, while the second one did not, which made a noticeable difference in the text-speech experience. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Pinterest all allow users to write custom alt text for their uploaded images. Custom alt text is always preferred to automatic alt text that's been written by an AI system, because auto-generated alt text is normally vague and not descriptive or accurate enough to be considered accessible. The alt text field on the desktop version of Facebook can be found by clicking Edit in the upper left corner of an image before posting it to your Facebook page, profile, or group, and typing the alt text in the appropriate field. You'll notice in this example that Facebook attempted to write some automatic alt text for the image, but the description of maybe an image of body of water, twilight, palm trees, sky, and nature does not do this picture justice at all, which is why you should always write custom alt text for your images. If you're in the Facebook mobile app, you'll find the alt text function under the three dots in the upper right corner of your uploaded image. This can be deceptive since there's also an edit button like there is on the desktop, but alt text is not housed there on the app. You may notice a warning flash that alt text is normally less than 100 characters. Your alt text should be as long as you need it to be in order to make your image accessible, so you can ignore this warning. On the desktop version and mobile app of Twitter, along with TweetDeck, the alt text option appears with images as add description or plus alt. You can also add alt text to GIFs on Twitter if you use their built-in GIF library on the mobile and desktop versions of the platform. When you get to the final screen on the Instagram app before publishing your post, you're going to tap Advanced Settings, scroll to Accessibility near the bottom, click Write Alt Text, and then add your image description in the provided field. If you have a carousel of images, there will be a slot for each image on that final screen. Once you've written your alt text, you can click Done in the upper right corner. The alt text feature is actually easier to find on the desktop version of Instagram than it is on the app. You'll find a drop-down labeled Accessibility just below the caption area on the final publishing screen. Click the drop down and the expanded view will show each of your uploaded images and a field next to them where you can write your alt text. While Creator Studio doesn't have an alt text field for Facebook posts usually, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, depending on how Facebook is feeling that day, you can use Creator Studio to post to Instagram using the platform's alt text field. Just make sure that your Instagram account is a creator or business account and linked to a published Facebook page. You'll find the alt text field under advanced settings after you upload an image to your post in Creator Studio. LinkedIn actually has one of the easiest alt text fields to find. As soon as you upload an image to your post, the option to add alt text appears below your image in the Edit Your Photo window. Just be conscious of the fact that LinkedIn does have a 300 character limit for alt text, so you'll want to be intentional about the images you choose, lest you run out of room for describing them. Finding the alt text field for Pinterest is also quite easy, but it's only an option for new pins that you upload directly to your account. You cannot retroactively add alt text to someone else's pin that you want to share or repin to your own board. When you create a new pin, you'll see a button labeled Add Alt Text to the right of the image you upload. This is a small sampling of a few third-party management sites and their alt text publishing capabilities. Unfortunately, only Sked Social can currently post to Instagram using the app's alt text field due to API restrictions. But as mentioned previously, you can use Facebook Creator Studio to post to Instagram with alt text. If you use a third-party management system other than Sked Social and want to continue using it to publish to Instagram, you can simply write your image description directly in the caption area of your post to make it accessible. Here are a few tips for writing effective alt text, along with some examples. You're going to want to write in plain language. You should focus on describing the physical aspects of your chosen images. Resist the urge to be ornate or overly effusive with your descriptions. You want to avoid having your own feelings or opinions about an image interfere with your ability to write accurate alt text. Try to be as objective as possible. Focus on accuracy, not length. I normally make my alt text about the length of one tweet, but that's also dependent on the image that I choose. The more complex the image, the longer the alt text will more than likely be, especially if the image features any copy. Writing alt text is a completely subjective exercise. No matter how objective you try to be, it'll vary image to image and creator to creator. Just focus on making your alt text as accurate as possible, and you should do just fine. Consider positional information. Think about the view that someone has when they're looking at your image. Is it a partial view of someone sitting at a table? Do you have a bird's eye view of a snow-covered forest? Directional or positional information can add important context to your alt text. Exclude writing image of or photo of in your alt text. It's already assumed that your alt text will be for a photo or image, and a screen reader will more than likely say image before or after reading your alt text. However, if your image file is something like an illustration, a painting, or even a screenshot, you can include that in your alt text because it gives the user a better idea of how to visualize the image. Use proper nouns and names when appropriate. If a well-known person, place, or thing is in your image and it adds context to your content, go ahead and name it. Don't describe everything. If something in the image is significant to understanding the whole picture or post, describe it. If it's not, skip it and save your characters for the important stuff. Focus on describing details that are contextually important to your entire post. As the content author, you have the power to decide what is important in your image. Use personal identifiers when needed. If the race, gender, ethnicity, sexuality, or another identifier for a person is relevant to the overall context of the image, feel free to add it. It also helps in this instance to think of your content as a whole. What information is included in the written part of your post? As the author, do you feel that extra identifiers in your alt text would add contextual value to the rest of your content? For example, let's say your content is about the history of women's suffrage. Including the gender and race of any people in the alt text of your images would be contextually important because both identifiers are prominent topics when talking about the history of women fighting for the right to vote. If you're unsure about how the subject of an image identifies or don't want to assume how they identify, stick to neutral terms such as using person instead of man or woman. For someone's race or ethnicity, describe the physical aspects of the person, like their skin tone or hair. Of course, the best way to ascertain how someone in your image identifies is to just ask them, if you are able to do so. Just make sure to explain to your subject that you're trying to accurately represent them in your content. Avoid abbreviations whenever possible. It's better to type out the full name or title of a person, place, organization, or initiative because screen readers don't always read abbreviations like acronyms and initialisms correctly. Lesser known abbreviations also don't add a lot of context to an image. If you use an initialism in your alt text or any of your content for that matter, type out the full name or title first and then place spaces or periods in between each letter of the initialism so the screen reader says it properly. An initialism is an abbreviation consisting of initial letters pronounced separately. Examples would be KPI, NYC, and FBI. An acronym is an abbreviation formed with the initial letters of other words and pronounced as a word. Examples would be NASA, SCUBA, and FOMO. Add keywords for improved SEO. This piece of advice is more for images on websites than social media, but it's still a good tip to keep in mind just in case search engines ever evolve to pick up on alt text in social media images. To my knowledge, they currently do not. However, keywords in the alt text field on Instagram posts do supposedly affect search results within the app. Just make sure that you're prioritizing the accurate description of your image first and foremost. Alt text should always be treated as an accessibility feature and not an SEO growth hack. If you can logically work your keywords into your alt text, go for it. If not, that's what hashtags are for. And avoid excessive flattened copy. If you're posting a copy-heavy graphic like an event flyer or an image that has text overlaid on it, you'll need to add alt text for all the flattened copy because a screen reader will not be able to read it. Flattened copy is text that has been turned into an object upon exporting from whatever program it was created in. You may also hear or see it called embedded copy or outlined text. Now that you have a better understanding of how to write effective alt text, let's talk about what shouldn't go into your alt text. Emoji icons. Emoji are typically added to social media content to give it added visual interest. So adding them to alt text makes no sense and could result in confusing alt text depending on the icons that you use, as we discussed earlier. Links. If you put a link in your alt text, it's not going to be clickable, and a screen reader will just read it out loud like any other word in your alt text. Links should go in the written part of your post or tweet, not the alt text. Hashtags. Like with links, hashtags aren't clickable in alt text and do not typically add additional context that would make an image description more accessible. Additional symbols. Symbols like the ones for trademark, copyright, and registered don't make an image description more accessible and will get read aloud by a screen reader, so avoid using them. And then non-essential information. Details like strings of random words, photographer credits, promotional information, calls to action, hidden messages, or other information that doesn't make your image description more accessible should not be included in your alt text. We're going to move on to something that greatly impacts accessibility. As I mentioned earlier, putting an excessive amount of copy onto a graphic is a bad idea. This design choice is mostly seen on Twitter, where we're limited in how long our tweets can be. You'll see celebrities, elected officials, major brands, athletes, professional sports teams, and municipal accounts tweeting graphics like this when they want to share a long statement, apology, or update. Not only is this horribly inaccessible, but it's just bad social media. Ideally, when a brand, organization, or public figure needs to share a long statement, that full readable statement will live on the news or PR section of their website. While social media is great for engaging with your followers, it should never be treated like a replacement for your website. After you've put your statement on your website, you can then link to it from a post or tweet as needed. If you still want a visual to go with your social media content, that's totally understandable, as most posts perform better if they have an image attached to them. Let's pretend this image is the original statement that you wanted to share on social media. That's a lot of copy to slam onto a single graphic, and it's not exactly easy to read. The attention span of most social media users is incredibly short. Plus, a majority of people look at social media on their phones nowadays, so the likelihood of someone stopping to read your graphic is much lower if it looks like this. Adding alt text to the image may make it accessible, but it won't make it engaging. Instead of using the full statement for your graphic, pull a single impactful quote from it and make that your visual for social media. Make sure the alt text you add to your graphic includes all the flattened copy on it as well. The alt text for this graphic could be something like blue graphic that reads, graphics created for social media should be treated like billboards, clear and concise. Now that you have your full statement on your site in a readable format and an abbreviated visual to complement it for social media content, you can just write something brief for your post or tweet and then include the link to the statement at the end. Now look at our two graphics side by side. At a quick glance, which is easier to read and engage with? I will let you decide. In our final section, we'll go over making audio and video accessible. I know everyone is probably thinking of captions, but I want to talk about video descriptions briefly. First, there are audio descriptions, which are a form of narration used to provide info surrounding key visual elements in videos for blind and low vision consumers. They're an accessible option on popular streaming services like Netflix, Hulu, and Disney+. As an example, I have this screenshot from my Netflix account. The audio description option, when available for a show or movie, is housed under the same menu as captions and subtitles. An audio description adds an additional audio track to a video that can be toggled on and off by supported platforms. Unfortunately, traditional audio descriptions are not supported by YouTube, Vimeo, or most social media platforms because you cannot upload multiple audio tracks with a single video. Although YouTube is supposedly working on a feature that could soon change that. Until then, an option for making accessible videos with audio descriptions for those platforms is to create two versions of your video. One with an audio description integrated with the rest of your video's audio and one without. Now, I do not suggest that anyone try to tackle making audio descriptions for their videos. Making audio descriptions is very difficult. It's a full-time position for a lot of people. So I like to do written descriptions instead of audio descriptions. This is another option for making the visual elements of your video accessible for blind and low vision users. You would create a written description and have it available as readable text with your video. Gucci did this for their Gucci Gift 2020 holiday campaign. The campaign's promotional video featured a 90s office party throwing a retro 70s themed party. The iconic fashion brand wrote a brief visual description of the video in the caption area on their YouTube channel and Facebook page. And then the social media team for the show Wheel of Time loves to post quick video snippets on the show's Twitter account, but many of their videos include little to no dialogue. In order to make the show's digital content more accessible, the social media team will thread a written description to each tweet that features a video. They have been commended by many of their fans and followers for creating inclusive content like this. And finally, we're going to chat about captions. Now, no matter where a video is posted, whether it's on website or social media, it should have captions, sometimes called subtitles, so that deaf and hard of hearing users can access and enjoy the content. Captions can also provide a better experience for a viewer with a learning disability, an attention deficit, or autism. They're also helpful if you don't understand the spoken language, you're in a noisy environment, a video has poor audio, or if a speaker is talking too fast or has an accent. It's also a well-known statistic that 85% of users watch or begin watching videos with the sound off, making captioning a good marketing move in addition to being an accessibility best practice. Now, captions come in two forms, closed and open. Closed captioning can be toggled on and off based on the preferences of the viewer and is typically an option on platforms like Netflix and YouTube. Open captions, on the other hand, are permanently burned onto a video and always visible. They're also known as embedded captions or burned captions. Open captions are normally used when closed captioning isn't an option or if the content creator wants more creative freedom over the look and feel of their captions. An easy way to add closed captioning to a video is to use YouTube. To do this, you're going to upload your video to your YouTube channel as unlisted. You can now freely work on your video without it popping up in search results or showing on your channel. Allow YouTube time to generate auto captions for your video. How long this process takes will depend on the length of your video and how much dialogue it includes. After some time has passed, head to the subtitles panel in YouTube Studio to check the status of the auto captions. You'll know when the auto captions are done because you'll see the option to duplicate and edit them. Once the auto captions have been created by YouTube, click duplicate and edit and revise the auto captions as needed. While YouTube's captioning technology is decent, it doesn't include punctuation or capitalization and sometimes struggles with proper names. So you should always edit the auto captions and never just publish them as is. After you've finished editing the auto captions, click the publish button in the upper right of the window. You're then going to delete the auto captions for the videos that your edited captions are the only available captions. And then allow time for YouTube to process your edited captions and sync their timing with the video. This, again, is a process that doesn't normally take long, but you're going to want to give it a few minutes. And then once YouTube has finished processing your captions, switch the status of your video to public if you want it to be public. And then open captions are the practical option when closed captioning aren't available. There are several great and affordable captioning apps out there, including Mixed Captions, Clipomatic, AutoCap, Capwing, Clips, and Threads. TikTok also has a unique text-to-speech feature that allows you to narrate any open captions you add to your content using the text tool within the app, as demonstrated here.
Did you know TikTok has a text-to-speech feature? Type your text and then press it. You'll see a text-to-speech option that you can customize the timing of.
All right, so thanks for tuning into this session. We're going to head into the Q&A portion now, but if you have feedback or more questions for me after we've all logged off for the day, feel free to connect with me online at accessible-social.com or find me on social media. I am always more than happy to chat about digital accessibility. Whew. I always feel like I've run a marathon after giving that presentation. I pack a lot of information in there. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to come on camera or drop them into the chat. I'm going to look at chat really quick just to make sure I didn't miss anything. Let's see. How does a screen reader pick up open captions since they are burned? Whoa, sorry, chat started moving. Burned on the video and not identified as separate file like the closed captioning. I was always told that these are not accessible. So a screen reader can't. Plain and simple, it's basically flattened copy. It can't. It's kind of hard to always use closed captioning because we don't always have that option. So I really always stick to closed captioning because it gives people the option to turn them on or off and they're more accessible. But if you're doing a video and an Instagram story, you kind of have to do, or not Instagram story, Facebook story still doesn't have them. We have closed captioning for Instagram now. But basically, if you don't have the option for closed captioning, you have to do open captions. So, but when in doubt, stick to closed captioning. So good question there. Let's see what else we got. I've seen social media where they write the alt text in the text area. What do you think about this? So I personally write my alt text in the caption area of Instagram because Instagram is kind of funky with their alt text field sometimes. I don't teach it that way anymore just because it confuses people, but you can write your alt text into the caption area. You just have to be very clear about the fact that it's the image description. So what I do is I write my normal caption. I do a line break and then I write the words image description, colon, and then whatever my image description would be so that it's clear this is the image description and not actually part of the caption. So you can do that if you don't have the capability to schedule something with the alt text fields, so on and so forth. So I normally only do that on my Instagram. Let's see. Could you talk more about how to balance image alt text with accompanying text, such as on Instagram? Is it okay to minimize the alt text if there is info in the accompanying text? Is it okay for the alt text and accompanying text to duplicate each other? So it really depends on the situation, depends on what is on your image, really. So you could have, information like, let's say you put something about an event onto Instagram and there's flattened copy and you write in the caption the date and the time and the location of that event. So really, you don't need to repeat that information in your alt text. You could just say promotional graphic for the event happening on whatever date you want to put or something like that. So it's really dependent on the situation and what's on your image and what you've put in the caption and what is leftover information that still needs to be told to the viewer. So I could probably do like a 2-hour presentation on flattened copy situations just because there's so many different scenarios to go over. I kind of showed a few of those with all the different graphics that you see from different organizations and brands on Twitter, especially. So, but it's up to you as the author to decide what's important for someone to know and what's missing from your alt text. Let's see. Best way to use Canva. Your best practice for campus departments that want to use Canva and just copy all the flyer content, date time as text in the post. So I try to make the alt text make sense and read like an actual sentence. So I don't suggest just copying and pasting and throwing, okay, it's a date and here's the time and here's the location, because it doesn't make sense. It should be full sentences. It should have punctuation, especially because if there is no punctuation, a screen reader doesn't know when to pause. So it just reads everything like a big run-on sentence. So, instead of saying date, time, place, it would be graphic for the event taking place on June 14th, 2022 at 5:00 p.m. in San Francisco, California. So you'd want to be a little bit more conversational, I guess, the way to put it with that. What is the best practice for campuses that post a lot of flyers? Don't post flyers. When it comes to flyers, I know this is so hard because everyone and their mother wants to send you flyers. I have trained faculty and staff at my own college to not expect me to post their flyers. If they send me flyers, I usually respond with thank you for the information. I'm not going to post your flyer because it's not accessible or ADA compliant, but I will use it to craft content for the post. So I just pull the information from the flyer essentially. Usually when it comes to event flyers, at least at my college, it's always a matter of where or how are people registering for this event? Is there a link that I can send them back to? Because that's preferable. So it really depends on what they have available as information for you. How are you getting people to register for this event? Is there a landing page they should go to? Stuff like that. So it takes a little bit of retraining when it comes to making people understand why flyers aren't social media friendly. Plus, the algorithms hate flyers. They get deprioritized, especially on Instagram. No one logs on Instagram looking for flyers. No one logs onto any social media platform looking for flyers, realistically, especially if you have a younger demographic of students. So yeah. If it's posted online, it needs to be accessible regardless. Yep, yes, it does. The best way to kind of try to educate people when it comes to accessibility and your content is to kind of walk them through the 4 reasons that I gave at the beginning of the presentation. So first, you really want to just make it clear we should just care about the experience that people have when they engage with us on social media. It should be accessible. And also explain that everyone at some point or another is going to become disabled either through age, illness, or injury. So we should just care about these people. If you need to move on to a different argument, I always bring up marketing. So if we make our content accessible, more people can actually engage with it. You're going to reach more people. You're going to get more people to register for classes, sign up for your events, stuff like that. So accessible information is engaging information. And then, of course, the third argument is we could get sued. There are higher education institutions that have been sued for accessibility. MIT and Harvard are the most notable ones. They were sued for having inaccessible video content on their websites. Again, it is not unlikely that social media apps and platforms are going to start feeling the pressure from the legal system very soon. It's just going to happen. Social media is a huge part of our day-to-day life at this point. So we need to think about that when we're creating content. A really, really good way to help people understand within your organization that they need to make accessible content is to put accessibility into your social media policy and get the legal department to approve it. So if you have, a section on your accessibility policy about accessibility, sorry, and you get it approved by legal, that's basically telling people this is the rule. Legal has approved it. Go argue with the lawyers if you don't like it. So it's very helpful to have the lawyers in your corner when it comes to accessibility, because they really know what it's like to have to do a web accessibility battle, and it's not fun. And usually you get dragged through the media like MIT and Harvard did and are still kind of experiencing now years later. So I highly recommend putting it into your social media policy. We just got a new board policy covering social media. Now we need to get training across the campus. Yeah, if you can figure out how to do training for this, I would definitely recommend it. You guys can always bring me in if you need me to yell at some faculty members. I'm pretty good at it at this point. But yeah, it's definitely pays off if it's not just you knowing the benefits and impact of accessibility. It is everyone's responsibility on campus, not just people who push the final button or post the content. It is everyone's responsibility. So we should all be aware of it. Any other questions? I think I covered everything in the chat, but if anyone else has other questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. So you say no flyers, but what about graphics that include all the details of, say, an event? Or is it the same as a flyer? It's kind of the same as a flyer, a graphic flyer. If you can find ways to not post a flyer, go for it. Usually my standard is, if someone wants me to post a flyer on Facebook, I'm like, okay, well, I'm just going to make an event post, because that makes way more sense. People can actually click the details and RSVP. When it comes to Instagram, I usually make a Instagram story, put it in there, and then I have a link to wherever they can register or find more information about the event. And then with Twitter, I just break down the information into a tweet and link to wherever they can register. So again, I usually just use flyers as here's the information you need to create actual content that's accessible. So again, there's a lot of retraining that has to happen with your peers, which is really hard, but it is doable. I've done it, and I work for a college as the only full-time social media person, and we have 11 campuses, all with their own social media. So I had to retrain a lot of people, and I'm still retraining people because we get new people all the time who want to use our social media. So I know flyers is like the bane of all our existences. I know, believe me. Other people in other industries who work in social media feel our pain as well. It's a big talking point in a lot of my group chats about flyers and social media. So no one likes them. I believe that this presentation is being recorded. So yes.
Yes, the presentation has been recorded and will be posted to our website after we have confirmed the accuracy of the captions.
Any recommendations for newsletters? Some departments create newsletters with Canva. My suggestion is to create an alternative accessible text word. Yeah, I would suggest like actually using like a newsletter platform. I mean, there's free newsletter platforms out there. I personally have a newsletter and I use Substack. It's free. I love using it. You can use Review is free and actually links through Twitter now, so you get more eyes on it. But it's definitely a better idea to use an actual service that you can do readable text on when it comes to newsletters. Otherwise, you just got a big flattened thing, and it usually takes up way too much memory and space in the email anyway, so might not always go through either. So that's probably a better option, is to suggest some newsletter platforms, which there are plenty of them out there now, thankfully. So Any recommendations for online flip books for newsletters that are accessible? One of the departments wants to use flip books. So you can make PDFs accessible. That is a whole other realm of accessibility that I don't have as much knowledge in. So you could probably have a whole presentation on PDF remediation. Honestly, it's a huge thing. Document remediation is huge. I don't have a lot of knowledge on that, unfortunately, but PDFs can be made accessible and be turned into flipbooks where you can still access all the information. So,
And that's a great segue. We are 1 minute from the end of our session, and our next session will be about using the Equidox product to remediate PDFs. So
perfect.
wonderful there. And I do see that there's a few questions that have come in. We'll make sure to work with you offline and get any answers if there's questions that haven't been answered, and we'll get them back to our community. So thank you very much, Alexa, for your time today. And
Thank you.
Everyone, we will take a 10-minute break. In 9 minutes, I will do housekeeping for our next session.